The desperate plea. The night sky burned with the ashes of a fallen world. The alien colony that once shone with bright towers now lay in ruins, its streets broken, its homes silent. Fires flickered in the distance, and smoke curled like black shadows against the stars. In the middle of this ruin, a group of young alien girls moved quietly, their steps careful, their voices whispers. They were frightened, hungry, and weak, but they carried something stronger than fear. Hope. They had survived the attack, though many of their people had not. Their families were gone, their city destroyed, and the invaders who came from the dark void still searched for any survivors. The girls hid during the day and moved only at night, but survival was becoming harder with each passing hour. They knew they could not last long alone, and yet they refused to give up. That night, as the stars shifted overhead, the youngest of them pointed toward the hills. Her voice trembled. "Look, someone is there." The others followed her gaze, and for the first time since the attack, they saw a figure moving across the ruins. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and unlike any they had seen before. He was not one of their people, and he was not an invader either. He was something else, something rare, a human. The girls froze in fear, stories of humans filling their minds. They had heard whispers from travelers that humans were dangerous, unpredictable, and wild. But they had also heard that humans were strong, survivors even in the harshest of places. The girls looked at one another, torn between fear and desperation. Finally, the oldest among them stepped forward, her voice trembling yet bold. "We must ask him," she said. "No one else will help us." The human moved cautiously, scanning the ruins as if expecting danger at every corner. His eyes were sharp, his movements quiet but precise. He carried a strange weapon strapped across his back, glowing faintly with blue light. When the girls gathered their courage and approached him, his hand went immediately to the weapon. "Stop," he said firmly, his voice carrying strength. The girls halted, their small hands raised in peace. "Please," the oldest one cried out, her voice breaking, "we need your help." The words echoed across the silent ruins. The human narrowed his eyes, studying them carefully. They were thin, their clothes torn, their faces pale with exhaustion. Yet their eyes shone with a desperate light. They were not his people, yet their suffering was clear. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The human said nothing, only watched them. He could walk away, he told himself. Helping them would only bring him trouble. He had seen too many worlds burn already. And yet, as he looked into their pleading eyes, something within him stirred. A memory, perhaps, of his own people, of children who once needed protection. The youngest girl stepped closer, tears shining on her face. "Please," she whispered, "we cannot survive without you." Her voice shook, but her words carried more strength than any weapon. The human felt his hand loosen from his weapon. He looked away, as if trying to hide the battle raging inside his heart. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and heavy. "You do not know what you are asking." The girls nodded, their eyes unblinking. "We know," the oldest replied, "but we have no choice." The human sighed, his gaze drifting toward the dark sky. The invaders were still out there, watching, hunting. If he stayed with these girls, he would become a target too. But leaving them would mean their deaths, and that thought sat heavy on his chest. He crouched down to their level, his face stern but not unkind. "You do not trust me," he said, "and I do not trust you." The girls nodded again, their fear clear, but their hope stronger. "But," the human added, his eyes glinting with a strange light, "we will try." At those words, relief washed over the group. The girls wept softly, their hands trembling as they lowered them from the air. They had begged, and he had answered. For the first time since their world fell, they were not alone. But as they stood together under the broken sky, danger stirred in the shadows. A faint sound echoed from the distance, a metallic growl, the sound of invader machines searching the ruins. The human's head snapped toward the noise, his hand gripping his weapon again. He turned back to the girls, his voice sharp. "Stay close. Stay quiet." The girls obeyed instantly, pressing close behind him. The night that had begun with desperation now burned with a new tension. The girls had found a protector, but in doing so, they had also drawn the attention of their enemies. The human led them into the darkness, his figure steady, his weapon ready. Behind him, the girls whispered prayers to stars that no longer shone. They had pleaded for help, and help had come, but none of them could imagine what would follow. A path that would shock not just them, but their entire world. The reluctant protector. The ruins stretched for miles, broken towers leaning like the bones of giants. The human walked ahead, his weapon ready, his eyes sharp. The alien girls followed close behind, their small feet crunching over the cracked stones. Each sound in the night felt louder than thunder. Every shadow felt alive. The girls whispered among themselves, wondering who this strange human was, why he carried such weapons, and why he chose to stay. The human heard their whispers, but said nothing, his mind heavy with doubt. He had not planned this. He came to the colony for his own reasons, reasons that were dangerous to speak. Yet now he was surrounded by frightened alien children, clinging to him as though he was their savior. He told himself again and again he should leave them, but every time he looked back at their wide, fearful eyes, something inside him would not let him walk away. They stopped in the shadow of a broken arch, the girls breathing hard, the youngest stumbling from exhaustion. The human crouched, pulling out a small container from his pack. It held food, rough and tasteless, but enough to keep someone alive. He handed it to the girls, one by one, watching as they ate quickly, as if afraid it might vanish. Their hands shook, their faces lit with relief. The human said nothing, only watched, his jaw tight. Finally, the oldest girl looked at him, her voice small but steady. "Why do you help us?" she asked. The human's eyes narrowed, the question hitting deeper than she could know. After a long silence, he answered, "Because you asked." It was the only truth he could give. As the girls rested, the human moved to the edge of the ruins, scanning the horizon. In the distance, faint red lights glowed. Enemy scouts, machines searching for survivors. His hand tightened on his weapon, his mind racing. He had fought them before. He knew how deadly they were. If the girls stayed with him, they would be hunted. If he left them, they would die anyway. Every choice led to blood. The youngest girl came to his side, clutching the torn fabric of her cloak. "Will you leave us?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The human looked down at her, his face unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he crouched her level. "I should," he admitted. "I have my own mission, my own path." Her eyes filled with tears, but he continued, his voice harder now. "But I will not tonight." The girl's lips trembled, then a small smile broke through. She ran back to the others, her voice bright for the first time since the attack. "He will not leave us," she said. The other girls clung to her words, their hope rising like fragile wings. The human turned away, his face shadowed, for he knew promises were dangerous. That night, they found shelter in the remains of an old transport hub, the walls cracked but still standing. The girls huddled together, whispering quietly. The human stayed awake, sitting near the broken doorway, his weapon across his knees. Every sound made him tense. Every gust of wind carried the scent of smoke and metal. He remembered battles on other worlds, other children crying, other nights filled with fire. He wondered if fate was mocking him, bringing him here again to choose between his own survival and the lives of strangers. As the night deepened, the oldest girl came to sit near him. She watched him in silence for a long time, then spoke softly. "You are not like us, and yet you fight like you belong here." The human did not answer, his gaze fixed on the dark. "Are you a soldier?" she asked, her voice gentle but curious. He let out a breath, his lips tightening. "I was," he said at last, "but not anymore." The girl studied him, sensing the weight in his words. "You fight because you have to," she said, almost to herself. The human turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. "No," he replied, his voice low. "I fight because someone has to." Silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken truths. The girl nodded slowly, her respect for him growing. When she returned to the others, she whispered, "He is more than we thought." The girls looked at him with new eyes, not just as a protector, but as something greater. From the shadows outside, danger stirred. The red lights of enemy scouts moved closer, their metallic legs clicking softly over the stone. The human rose silently, gripping his weapon, his muscles tense. The girls watched with wide eyes as he stepped into the night, his figure framed by the broken doorway. He did not tell them to follow. He did not tell them to hide. They already knew. The first scout appeared, its glowing eyes cutting through the dark, its claws scraping against stone. The human moved like lightning, his weapon flashing with blue fire. The machine fell, crashing into the rubble with sparks and smoke. The sound echoed across the ruins. More machines answered with a metallic roar. The girls gasped, their fear returning, but in their fear grew something else, faith. They watched as the human fought alone, his movements sharp and fierce, every strike precise, every shot deadly. He was only one man, yet he stood against machines built to kill armies. And in that moment, the alien girls knew they had not only found a protector, they had found a warrior, the hidden threat. The night was not silent anymore. The echo of broken machines still lingered in the air, smoke rising from the wreckage, the smell of burned metal mixing with the ash of the ruined city. The alien girls huddled close together, their eyes fixed on the human, who stood over the shattered scouts, his weapon glowing faintly in the dark. He did not look at them. His gaze was on the horizon, his body tense, as if he expected more enemies to appear. For the first time, the girls saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of the machines, but of something unseen, something waiting beyond the shadows. He walked back toward them slowly, his boots crunching against the rubble. "Pack your things," he said firmly. "We cannot stay here." The girls obeyed without question, gathering their few belongings, their hands trembling. As they prepared to move, the oldest girl whispered, "They will not stop, will they?" The human shook his head, his jaw tight. "They will keep coming until nothing is left," he replied, his voice sharp with certainty. The girls fell silent, the truth heavier than any weapon. They traveled through the ruins, the broken city stretching endlessly. The girls whispered among themselves, their voices low and anxious. "Why are they hunting us?" the youngest asked, clutching the cloak around her shoulders. The human answered without turning his head, "They are not hunting you. They are hunting me." The words struck them like a blade. The girls looked at one another in shock. If this was true, then the danger they faced was not only because of their ruined world, but because of the man they now followed. And yet, none of them stepped away from him. Instead, their steps quickened, as though staying close to him gave them strength. They reached the edge of the city just before dawn, the faint light of a broken sun bleeding across the horizon. There, hidden beneath collapsed towers, was an old service tunnel. The human guided them inside, the air thick with dust, the walls covered with old markings from time before war. The tunnel was dark and narrow, their footsteps echoing loudly, every sound like a warning. Halfway through, the human stopped suddenly, raising a hand. The girls froze, their hearts pounding. From deeper within the tunnel came a strange sound, a low hum, almost like breathing. The human's weapon rose slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his voice like steel. From the darkness ahead, two glowing lights appeared, red and sharp. A shape emerged, tall, thin, armored, its body moving with mechanical precision. It was not a scout, it was something worse. The girls gasped softly, their hands covering their mouths. The human fired, the tunnel lighting up with blue flashes. The machine staggered but did not fall. Its voice crackled, cold and harsh. "Target located, human asset confirmed." The girls looked at one another in shock. Human asset, the words burned into their minds. What did it mean? Why did the enemy know him? The human fought with fury, his weapons slicing through the dark, his movements sharp and desperate. After a brutal clash, the machine collapsed, its body sparking, its voice fading into silence. The tunnel smelled of smoke and blood. The girls rushed to him, their voices trembling. What did it mean? The oldest asked. Why did it call you that? The human wiped the sweat from his face, his expression unreadable. It means, he said slowly, that I was never supposed to be here alone. The silence that followed was heavier than the rubble around them. The girls felt a chill run through them, not from the dark, but from the secrets hidden in the human's past. They had begged him for help, but now they realized he carried a truth that could shake not only their lives, but their entire world. As they pressed deeper into the tunnel, the human grew quieter, his thoughts buried in shadows. The girls whispered, their fear growing. Do you think he's lying? One asked. The oldest shook her head, her eyes following his back as he walked ahead. No, she said, I think he is hiding something worse. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, the remains of an ancient station, its walls cracked, its lights long dead. The human led them inside, but his eyes never stopped searching, scanning every corner as if expecting the walls themselves to come alive. The girls collapsed in exhaustion, their small bodies trembling with fear and hunger. The human stood guard, his weapon never lowering, his eyes fixed on the dark. Above them, far above the ruins of the city, the enemy gathered, their machines spreading like a black tide. They had found what they were searching for, not the girls, but the human, and they would not stop until he was captured. The girls did not yet know the truth, but soon they would, and when they did, their world would never be the same. The bond of survival. The underground chamber was cold and silent, the walls cracked with age, dust falling with every step. The alien girls huddled together, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling from exhaustion. The human stood apart, leaning against a broken pillar, his weapon still in his hands, his gaze fixed on the dark passages that stretched deeper into the ruins. For hours he did not move, his breath steady, his body like stone. The girls watched him carefully, their fears slowly mixing with something new, respect. When morning light filtered faintly through cracks above, the human spoke for the first time in hours. We cannot stay here, he said, his voice firm. They will find us again. The girls groaned softly, their limbs heavy, their eyes tired. We are too weak, the youngest whispered, tears forming in her eyes. We cannot run forever. The human looked at them, his expression hard. Then you must learn to fight, he said. The girls stared at him in shock, their voices overlapping in fear. Fight? We are not warriors, the oldest said. We do not know how. The human's eyes narrowed, his voice cutting through their fear. You will learn, he said, or you will die. The words struck like a blade, sharp and merciless. The girls fell silent, their faces pale, but they understood. If they wanted to live, they had no choice. That day, in the broken chamber, the human began to train them. He showed them how to move silently, how to listen for danger, how to hold stones like weapons, how to use shadows as shields. At first, their hands shook, their steps clumsy, their fears stronger than their courage. But the human did not stop, his voice commanding, his patience thin but steady. Again and again, he pushed them, until their movements grew sharper, their eyes brighter. The oldest girl was the first to succeed, striking a target with surprising strength. The human nodded once, a faint sign of approval. You see, he said, you are not as weak as you believe. The younger ones followed, their laughter breaking through the fear when they finally hit their marks. For the first time since the destruction of their home, they felt something more than terror. They felt strength. That night, as they rested, the girls whispered among themselves. He is harsh, one said, but he is making us stronger. Another nodded, her eyes shining. He believes we can survive. The youngest whispered, her voice soft with wonder. He is like the stories, the ones of warriors who protect the weak. Their whispers reached the human, but he pretended not to hear. He sat in silence, staring at the faint light above, his thoughts locked away. The bond between them grew quickly, forged not from kindness but from survival. The girls began to follow his commands without question, trusting him even when fear clawed at their hearts. And in turn, the human began to see them not only as burdens, but as sparks of life refusing to be crushed. Their laughter, small and fragile, reminded him of something he thought he had lost long ago. But danger was never far. Late one night, as they practiced in the ruins, the ground shook with a distant roar. The human froze, his hand tightening on his weapon. "Scouts again," the oldest whispered. The human shook his head, his face grim. "No," he said, "something worse." A shadow moved in the distance, massive and heavy, its steps crushing stone. The girls clung to one another, their eyes wide with terror. "What is it?" they cried. The human raised his weapon, his voice sharp. "A hunter!" The machine stepped into view, towering over the ruins, its body armored, its arms ending in blades, its red eyes glowing like fire. It was built for one purpose, to destroy anything that resisted. The girls screamed, but the human stood firm, his weapon ready. He turned to them, his voice hard but steady. "Remember what I taught you." The girls froze, fear battling against the lessons they had learned. "Run, hide, survive," he commanded. "I will fight." The girls obeyed, their steps quick as they disappeared into the shadows. The human faced the hunter alone, his figure small against the giant machine. The battle exploded with sound and fire, blue light clashing against red, metal against will. From their hiding place, the girls watched, their hearts pounding. Every strike of the machine shook the ground. Every shot of the human lit the dark. He fought with fury, his movements precise, his strength unbroken. But the hunter was relentless, pressing him harder with every blow. The girls cried silently, fear gripping them, yet something else grew inside them. Courage. The oldest clenched her fists, whispering, "He is not fighting only for himself. He is fighting for us." The others nodded, their fear burning into determination. For the first time, they did not feel like helpless children. They felt like survivors. The human staggered, his weapon sparking, the hunter towering over him. The girls stepped out of the shadows, their small hands gripping stones and broken metal. They hurled them with all their strength, striking the machine's sensors, distracting it. The human seized the chance, his blade flashing, his strike cutting deep into the machine's core. The hunter roared, its body shaking, then collapsed with a crash that shook the earth. Silence followed, broken only by the girls' ragged breaths. The human looked at them, his face hard but his eyes softer than before. "You listened," he said. "You survived." The girls smiled weakly, their fear replaced with pride. That night, as they rested in the ruins, their bond was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable. They were no longer just frightened children and a reluctant protector. They were becoming something else, a team, a family, and together, they would face whatever came next. The enemy's fear. The ruins no longer felt empty. Word had spread like fire carried by the wind. Whispers echoed through the broken colony, not from the survivors, but from the enemy themselves. A single human had stood against their machines, and worse, he had won. In the shadows of a hidden outpost, the alien girls sat close together, their faces pale but their eyes sharper than before. They whispered about the battle, about the way the human had fought the hunter and survived. He sat apart, cleaning his weapon, his hands steady, his face unreadable. The girls stared at him, not with fear anymore, but with awe. "They fear you," the oldest girl whispered, her voice trembling. The human looked up, his gaze hard. "They should," he said, his tone flat. The girls fell silent, the weight of his words pressing against their hearts. Far above them, in the command chamber of the invader fleet, the leaders spoke with unease. Their machines had crushed countless worlds. Their armies had destroyed civilizations. Yet now they spoke of one man, one human. He is dangerous. One hissed, their voice mechanical and sharp. He is unpredictable. Another added, he does not fight like the others. They called him the ghost, for he appeared where he should not, striking fast and vanishing into the ruins. Their fear was not of his strength alone, but of what he could inspire. Back in the outpost, the girls watched as the human rose, his weapon slung across his back. We cannot stay hidden, he said. The enemy grows restless. But where can we go? The youngest asked, her voice small. The human's eyes narrowed, scanning the broken horizon. Forward, he said simply. The journey that followed was harsh. The roads were broken, the sky heavy with smoke. Enemy scouts prowled like predators in the night. But with every step, the girls grew stronger, their lessons taking root. They no longer moved like prey. They moved like shadows, like survivors. And wherever they went, rumors spread. The human walks with survivors. The human defies the machines. In one ruined village, the girls saw something they had not expected. Enemy scouts retreated at the sight of the human, their glowing eyes flickering with hesitation. The girls gasped, clutching one another. They are afraid, the oldest whispered. The human said nothing, only kept walking. But inside, he felt the shift too. The hunters were no longer chasing blindly. They were watching carefully, wary of him. That night, as they rested in the hollow shell of a fallen tower, the girls dared to ask the question burning in their minds. Why do they fear you? The youngest asked, her eyes wide. The human's hands stilled, his weapon half dismantled. After a long silence, he answered, his voice low. Because I do not fight to survive, he said, I fight to win. The girls shivered, not from fear, but from the power in his words. They had begged him for protection, but now they saw he was something more. Not only a shield, but a blade. But fear spreads in more ways than one. Among the enemy ranks, soldiers began to whisper of failure, of defeat, of the human who defied their masters. Doubt crept into their mechanical voices, hesitation into their movements. And hesitation was deadly. The next ambush proved it. In a broken canyon, machines surrounded them, red lights blazing, weapons raised. The girls gasped, clutching stones and broken pipes, ready to fight as they had been taught. The human stood at the front, his weapon glowing with blue fire, his stance unshaken. The enemy hesitated, their claws clicking, their voices buzzing with static. One machine stepped forward, its voice trembling despite the steel. You should not exist, it hissed. You were meant to be erased. The human's lips curled in a faint, cold smile. Then erase me, he replied, his voice sharp as a blade. The battle erupted, but the enemy fought with less fury, their strikes hesitant, their unity broken by fear. The human cut through them like fire through dry grass, his weapon flashing, his movements unstoppable. The girls fought too, striking with stones and makeshift blades, their courage burning bright. Together, they shattered the ambush, leaving broken machines smoking in the dust. When silence fell, the girls looked at the wreckage with wide eyes. They are afraid of you, the oldest said again, her voice almost reverent. The human looked down at the broken machines, his face grim. They should be afraid of you too, he said, his eyes meeting theirs. The girls blinked in surprise, their hearts pounding. Us, the youngest asked. The human nodded, his voice steady. You are no longer children hiding in ruins, he said. You are survivors, and survivors are dangerous. The girls fell silent, his words settling deep inside them. They had once begged for protection, but now they felt something different. They were becoming part of his legend, part of the fear that spread through the enemy like wildfire. Far above, in the enemy fleet, the commanders trembled with unease. Their war machines had no fear, and yet their voices betrayed doubt. One human, with a handful of alien girls, was changing the tide of their campaign. They feared not just his strength, but what his survival meant. Hope. and hope was something they had never been able to kill. The shattered truth. The ruins were quiet after the last battle, too quiet. The alien girls gathered around a small fire made from broken wires and scraps of wood, their tired faces lit by the weak glow. They whispered about what they had seen. The enemy retreating, their fear growing, the humans standing against them like a wall of steel. To them, he was a savior, but the human himself sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the flames, his thoughts hidden. The oldest girl studied him carefully, her heart heavy with questions. She had seen the way the machine spoke to him, calling him an asset, recognizing him when they should not have. She remembered his words, that he was not supposed to be here alone. And deep inside, she feared the truth. When the fire burned low, she spoke, her voice steady though her hands shook. "You are hiding something," she said. The human looked up slowly, his face hard. "You should rest," he said, his tone sharp. But the girl did not back down. "No," she insisted. "We deserve to know. Why do they call you one of them?" The other girls turned, their wide eyes filled with fear and curiosity. The human sighed, the weight in his chest too heavy to carry any longer. "You want the truth?" he asked, his voice low. They nodded, their small faces pale. The human's gaze turned toward the broken sky above, and finally, he spoke. "I was not sent here by chance," he said. "I was sent here by design." The girls gasped, confusion and fear rising in their eyes. "I was part of a program," he continued, "a weapon built for war, trained to fight in ways others could not." His voice grew darker, his memories bleeding through. "When your world was marked for destruction, I was dispatched, not to save it, but to test it." The words struck the girls like a storm. Their voices overlapped in panic. "Test it? What do you mean?" The human's eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. They wanted to see if one human could stand against an entire invasion, to measure survival, resistance, and fear. He looked at them then, his gaze sharp but filled with regret. "You were never supposed to survive." The youngest began to cry, her hands covering her face. "You lied to us," she sobbed. The oldest clenched her fists, her voice trembling with anger. "You used us," she said. "We trusted you." The human did not flinch, though their words cut deeper than any blade. "I never asked for your trust," he said, his voice heavy. "But I gave you what I could, life, survival." The chamber filled with silence, broken only by the sound of the youngest weeping. The girls' bond with him trembled, their faith shaken, their hearts torn. And yet, even in their anger, they could not deny what they had seen. He had fought for them, bled for them, risked everything for them. Was he their protector, or was he their executioner? As the girls argued in whispers, a new sound rose from the shadows. The human froze, his weapon lifting. From the far end of the chamber, a figure appeared. Not a machine, but something worse. An armored enemy commander, tall and terrifying, its voice sharp and cold. "So this is where the traitor hides," it hissed, its red eyes glowing. The girls screamed, clutching one another. The human stepped forward, his weapon raised, his face like stone. The commander's voice echoed. "You were ours," it said, "built from us, trained by us, designed to be the perfect weapon, and now you defy us." The girls gasped, their fears confirmed. The human was not only sent by design, he was linked to the enemy itself. The human's voice was sharp as fire. "I was yours," he said, "but I'm no longer." The commander lunged, its blades slicing through the air. The human met it head-on, sparks flying as steel clashed against steel. The girls watched in horror as the battle shook the chamber, every strike echoing like thunder. The human fought with fury, but the commander's strength was immense. Blow after blow pushed him back, his body straining, his breath harsh. The girls cried out, torn between fear and betrayal. "Should we help him?" one asked, her voice breaking. The oldest looked at the human, blood running from his side as he struck back with desperate strength. Her heart raged with anger and pain, but still, she whispered, "Yes, because without him, we are nothing." They hurled stones, distracted the commander, their small voices screaming in defiance. The human seized the chance, his blade flashing, his strike cutting deep into the commander's chest. The enemy roared, collapsing in sparks and smoke, its final words hissing. "You cannot escape what you are." The human staggered, blood dripping from his wound, his face pale. The girls rushed to him, their tears mixing with anger, their fear with loyalty. The oldest spoke, her voice trembling. "You may have lied, but you chose us, you fought for us." The human looked at her, his eyes heavy with regret. "I chose you because you changed me," he whispered, "and that is the truth." The chamber fell silent, the fire flickering weakly. The truth had shattered their bond, but also remade it. No longer simple trust, no longer blind faith, but something deeper, forged in pain and survival. And outside, the enemy fleet prepared for war. For they now feared not only the human, but the possibility that he had found something stronger than any weapon. Hope. The shock that changed their world. The night sky burned once more, the enemy fleet spreading across the heavens like a sea of red stars. From the broken towers of the colony to the mountains far beyond, their machines descended, their voices sharp and merciless. The alien girls huddled behind the human, their hearts trembling, their hands clutching one another. This was no patrol, no small hunt. This was war. The human stood at the front, his weapon glowing faintly, his wounds still bleeding from the last battle. His body was weak, but his eyes burned with fire. He looked at the girls, their faces pale, but their eyes filled with courage. "You must run," he said, his voice firm. The oldest shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. "No, we will not leave you," she whispered. The others echoed her words, their voices trembling but strong. "We stay." The human's chest tightened, a rare warmth breaking through his iron heart. They had once begged for his protection, but now they stood beside him, not as children, but as warriors. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to believe. Perhaps they truly had a chance. The first wave struck, machines pouring into the ruins, their claws scraping stone, their weapons blazing. The human roared, his weapon flashing with blue fire, cutting down the first line. The girls moved as he had taught them, quick and sharp, striking from the shadows, throwing stones and broken blades with deadly precision. They were small, but they fought with hearts larger than the machines could understand. The battle raged like a storm, the ruins shaking with fire and smoke. For every machine that fell, two more came, their red eyes glowing, their voices hissing. The human fought with fury, his strength burning brighter than his pain, his body moving faster than thought. But even he knew this was too much. Then it happened, the shock that none of them expected. The sky split with light, not from the enemy, but from above. A massive ship descended, its hull bearing the marks not of the invaders, but of humans. The girls gasped, their eyes wide. "More of your kind," the oldest whispered. The human's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "No," he said, "not more of me, worse." The ship opened, and figures stepped out, armored, human, their weapons gleaming. But their eyes were cold, their movements mechanical, their faces like stone. They were soldiers, part of the same program that had created him. They had not come to save, they had come to finish what had been started. The girls cried out, confusion filling their hearts. "Humans fight humans?" the youngest asked, her voice breaking. The human's gaze hardened, his weapon rising. "They're not my people," he said, "not anymore." The battle turned into chaos, machines and soldiers clashing, the human caught between them. The alien girls fought desperately, their small bodies darting through rubble, striking at weak points, saving one another from certain death. And all the while, the human fought both enemies, his creators and their machines. Every strike he made was a rebellion. Every breath he took was defiance. But the final shock came not from the battle, but from the choice. The human's communicator, long silent, crackled to life. A voice cold and sharp, filled the air. Return, asset, it commanded, or the world burns. The girls froze, their eyes on him, their hearts breaking. If he returned, perhaps they would be spared. If he refused, the fleet would destroy everything. The human looked at them, his eyes heavy. "You must choose," the oldest whispered, her voice trembling. For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the ruins, the fire crackling, the machines pausing. Then the human spoke, his voice like thunder. "I choose them." He turned, his weapon blazing, his body moving with a fury greater than before. He struck down his enemies with fire and steel, his roar echoing across the broken city. The girls followed, their courage unbroken, their faith stronger than ever. Together, they drove the invaders back, their unity more powerful than fear. But when the dust settled, the human lay on his knees, blood running from his wounds, his strength fading. The girls rushed to him, their tears falling, their voices crying out. "Do not leave us," they begged. The human looked at them, his eyes soft for the first time. "You are strong now," he whispered, "stronger than me." And with those words, he fell silent. The girls wept, their cries echoing into the sky. But when they rose, their eyes burned with fire. They carried his weapon, they carried his memory, they carried his defiance. And as the enemy looked upon them, they trembled. For the legend of the human had become more than a man. It had become a flame, carried in the hearts of those he had saved. The shock that followed was not his death, but his legacy. The world changed, for the invaders had learned fear. And the alien people, broken and scattered, began to rise. Not because they were saved, but because one human had taught them how to fight.